My dear course participants, today we are going to discuss about managerial communication. As you are aware that what is the basic model of communication process, and it must have been taught earlier in your previous sessions, that what is the communication model. Communication model is there is a sender, there is a receiver, there is a message, and message need to be coded, and when it is being sent there is a noise level and it is being decoded and it reaches to the receiver, and finally it has been confirmed that the message which has been sent, whether it has been reached to the receiver as it has to be communicated or not. So it's a very basic model of this communication, but today we are going to discuss on this what is the importance of this communication, and that too with the managers. Because if you talk about this sales management, if you talk about this managing the people into the organizations, what is most important? Most important is managing the people, and managing the people, it means you need to communicate effectively. So what is managerial communication? Managerial communication, there are a lot of these theories which has been propagated, which has been written by so many of the authors as well as the researchers, that what exactly is the managerial communication. One very good study on this managerial communication, that is based on this, what are the expectations of this one particular community, that is manager, and this another community, that is those who are going to take the commands, and those who are the subordinates. So manager and subordinate, or subordinate to manager, or I can say there is a superordinate and the subordinate. So it's a role of these expectations. What a manager is having these expectations from his subordinates, similarly what a subordinate is having this expectations from a manager. So there was a good study which was conducted in this Harvard Business School in terms of this expectations, and a different kind of this model which has been classified in terms of this Pygmalion effect as well as the Galati effect. So let us talk about this, what exactly is the managerial communication. So you see, each and every one is having certain kind of this expectations from the people. So like a manager is having certain expectations from their subordinates. Similarly, their subordinates are having these expectations from these managers also. So manager is having expectations that my team should perform and they should achieve the assigned targets, as well as this entire growth, as well as this market share that continuously should grow. Whereas it has been found into that study, this most of these managers, they expect less about their subordinates, and once they expect less from their subordinates, it is obvious they meet up to their expectations. Suppose they have expected this much of the level, accordingly the subordinates, they will reach and they will meet out their expectations. So manager is having this certain more of these expectations, accordingly subordinates will try to achieve to that particular level, and they will further meet out the expectation of these managers. So what it means, that if you are having this higher expectations from the subordinates, accordingly your subordinates are going to achieve that level of these expectations, and ultimately it will lead to a higher performance. The another interesting point into this particular model is which has been investigated, and it has been found that most of the managers, they expect less from their subordinates, whereas once it has been communicated to the managers, they do not believe into that we have less expectations from our subordinates. And what is the meaning of this expectations, having this less of this expectations from the subordinate is, like if I am a manager and I am going to have this certain expectations from my subordinates, then definitely first I need to convince that particular idea, first I need to convince that particular assignment, only then once I am convinced, only then I can convince to my subordinates. So managers do have a less level of the expectations, and that's why they are having less expectations from the subordinates. But most of the managers, they do not believe into that. They believe that we are always having this high expectations, but most of this subordinates, they are unable to meet that expectations. So like one scenario where you are having this high level of this expectation, accordingly this performance will go up. So high level of this performance, it means high level of the expectations, or vice versa. High level of expectations and high level of the performance. But it has been observed that there are certain kind of subordinates, individuals, those who are working in a team, and they perform extremely well and they exceed the expectations of their superordinates, their managers. Why? Now if you say, I was having less expectation from one of my teammates, although he has exceeded my expectation. It means somewhere, somehow, he was self-driven. He was self-motivated to achieve something. If you look at this, so many of the scenarios, even which are available in our Hindu mythology, this example of this Eklavya was having this high expectation from himself, and he reached to Dronacharya. He wanted to prove himself. He must be the one of the best Dhanurdhar. But ultimately, his master, Dronacharya, was not having that much of the high expectations. But ultimately, we all are aware that how Eklavya has proved himself that in spite of this less expectations of his master, and he has proved that I am one of the best Dhanurdhar. So you see, it was the self-driven kind of this expectations which individual was having, and he has exceeded that expectations. So it means even if a manager is not having this high level of the expectations from their subordinates, in spite of this, there are a few individuals those who exceed the expectations of their master, of their manager. So looking at these two kind of the scenarios, it means this high expectations, it means high performance, low expectations means low performance, but there are certain kind of things where you are having less expectations as a manager, in spite of that your subordinate is giving this better results. Or sometimes you are having a high expectations from one individual, in spite of that he is unable to meet out your expectations. So if I take a grid, 2 by 2 grid, into this in terms of expectations as well as the performance, so having this high expectation, accordingly that individual is performing, it means they are this kind of this people that because of the high expectation of the manager, and that's why this individuals has performed. So it means this high expectation of the manager and they have performed, it means this Pygmalion effect has occurred. Whereas in spite of this low expectation of the manager, individual has performed extremely well, exceeded the expectations of the manager, it means it's a kind of defect which was which has occurred within itself of that individual, and that's why he could be able to perform. And that is the kind of this effect which has been nomenclatured as Galati effect. So expectations versus this performance. It's one of the good classical model which has been put up, and in most of these studies which has been found, there are the more number of the peoples where this Pygmalion effect that works, but there are certain exceptions where that Galati effect is also happens. So by this way, if you are a manager, and definitely you need to have this high level of the expectations from your team, from each and every individuals, definitely you are going to perform better, your team is going to perform better. And how to make that particular communication, how to make that high level of this performance, high level of the expectations communication to the team, it's a task of a manager. And once a manager is able to do it, definitely he will prove himself as a team leader, he will prove himself a performing team, as a leader of a performing team.